In this lab, we are going to be creating a diagram for our database. So the book asks you to start with a starter drawing, but we're going to start from scratch using Visio 2013 or newer if you have it. And even if you're using an older version of Visio, I'm going to walk you through the entire process just so you know how to create these from scratch. So we're going to start with, once you get Visio open, we're going to create a new drawing. If you don't already have it on the screen, so you can see I've got crow's foot database notation already on here because I use it periodically. But if you click on categories, under categories, you are going to go to software and database. So you want the software and database category when you're creating your new drawing. And from this list, look for crow's foot database notation. So mine is right here, but it's going to be crow's foot database notation. You're going to go ahead and open that. It doesn't matter whether you use metric or US. We don't really use the measurements, so that won't matter too much. But you're going to click on Create, and it's going to create your drawing. Pretty basic. There's not much here, just a blank canvas. You might have a little extra box down here on the left. You can get rid of that if you don't want it, but it doesn't matter too much. So you've got some basic drawing elements available to you over here on the left. You've got entity, primary key, attribute, primary key separator, relationship. So what you're going to do is you're going to click and drag the entity into your drawing area. Now, just so you know, you can go off that drawing area. So it's okay if you're off to the side or something like that. It's not going to be a problem if you go off that area that they give you. And in fact, you can see mine automatically made it bigger when I tried to go off the drawing area. So let me start with this. So the first entity that we have to create, and by the way, once you put your entity on the screen, if you double click on any portion of it, it should highlight it. So for example, for the entity name, I'm going to change this to patients. And then for the primary key, I'm going to call it patient key. And then I'm going to start to fill in all my attributes, which were brainstormed earlier. So I'm just going to click on these fields like this. So I got first name, then I'll have middle name. Now I need to add an additional attribute. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click on attribute and drag it, and it adds another attribute, and I can continue typing in attribute names. So we have last name, and then again, I'm going to do the same thing, click on attribute, click underneath, put the next one in this case, address, and so forth and so on. So these are all the attributes that you're going to want for patient. So once you get your patient on the screen, then we're going to add doctors because all of our patients need to have a doctor. So I'm going to click entity again, and this time I'm going to call it doctors. And as I did before, I'm going to create my primary key. In this case, it's going to be doctor key. And by the way, we're making up that key, so that is a surrogate key. And we're going to have a doctor first name and a doctor last name. So we'll have a doctor first name and then doctor last name. Just like that. So now we've got our two tables. Now, this next part, so we have to figure out how these two tables connect to one another. So what is it that these tables have in common? In other words, what's the relationship? So patients have doctors, and doctors have patients. Now the question is, how many patients can a doctor have, and how many doctors can a patient have? And the answer to that is many, right? So many patients can have many doctors. So a doctor can have many patients, and a patient can have many doctors, typically. So in order to express that relationship, we would drag the relationship onto the screen. Then I'm going to click each side. So what I'm going to do, what I've done is I click that little box, and I'm going to drag it into the table. Now, when you drag it into the table, notice I could release it when it highlights an attribute in only green or any of these objects. But I don't want that. I want to make sure that I release it where the entire table, the entire entity is highlighted in green. So make sure the whole table is highlighted in green before you release, and it'll attach it to that table. Then I'm going to take the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to click on this other table, the doctor's table. I'm going to release, and now my entities are related. They have a relationship between the two. An important thing you'll notice here is that there is two types of dots on either side of that relationship line. On the left side, you see a green dot, and on the right side, there's a green dot, but there's another green circle around that dot. The one with the circle around it is the end. Okay, so that's the end point. The other side is the begin. So sometimes you'll ask yourself, which side is the beginning and which side is the end? The beginning, in this case, is on the left with just a single dot. The dot with the circle around it on the right is the end. Why is that important? Now, it's hard to see those relationships, so to make them easier to see, and I'd appreciate if you do this on the same way on yours when you turn them in, I'm going to right-click, go to Styles. I'll show you this again. So I right-clicked, and I went to Styles. I'm going to go to Line. I'm going to increase the weight of that line. I'm going to make it a 3-point line. And now you can see the symbols on the endpoint. So this is the crow's foot notation, which we learned about in this course. So you can see right now, patients can have one and only one doctor, and a doctor can have 0 or many patients. But we know that that's not the case here. Instead, we want a different relationship. So if I right-click, I can set the begin symbol to be 0 or 1, or 0 or more, and so forth. I'm going to do 0 or more is fine. A doctor can have 0 or more patients. And then I'm going to right-click and set that endpoint. So I'm going to set the end symbol also to, well, this time I'm going to do 1 or more because I think you can't really be a patient without having a doctor. So we'll set that one to 1 or many. So now I can have my patient has 1 or many doctors, and my doctor has 0 or many patients. So we've created that relationship. Now this drawing's getting a little bit cramped here, so I'm going to hit the minus button on the bottom, and that's going to zoom it out a little bit to make it easier to work with. So now I can add another entity. So the next entity we need to add is the patient initial medical history. So again, this is from our textbook. So this table is going to also have the patient key. That's going to be the primary key. The lung disorder, high blood pressure, and heart trouble are going to be our attributes. So those might be just flags that we set or maybe some background information. So we also have to, well, there's a couple things that we have to do here. So the patient key, which was the primary key here, isn't just the primary key. It's also the foreign key. So I need to set that to the foreign key because that's actually, and I'll zoom this out so it's easier to see. I'll zoom it out a little bit further. So we have the patient, which is the patient key is what identifies a patient. We're going to reference that from here. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to click on Set Foreign Key. So now we have the label on that table for both the primary and the foreign key. So now we have that set for patient medical history. Now, another problem you may have noticed, if we scroll back up, here we've got the doctors, which has a primary key, and we have patients, which has a primary key. But there is nothing that connects these two tables together. So we have to do something to connect these together. However, you'll notice there really isn't a way to do this. There's really no way to put a many-to-many relationship. So we won't be able to add that relationship yet, but we're going to do that when we get to the physical design, which is going to happen later on. So for now, we can just leave it the way it is. But down here, we are going to put in the relationship here. So we know that it's a one-to-one relationship between the patient and the patient's initial medical history. So I'm going to click on the relationship line, just like I did before. Now you could do this, click on the line and drag it in, but then you're going to have to resize it like we did the other one. So one thing you could try, in some versions of Visio this will work, you can hit Control-C, and then you can hit Control-V to paste, and then we can just use the existing styled line. So let me click and drag that. Okay, so it's there. We have our endpoint and our beginning point, but they are wrong. We have to adjust those. In this case, we want them to be one-to-one. So I'm going to right-click. I'm going to set my begin to 1 and only 1. And I'm going to set my end symbol to 1 and only 1. So now we have a one-to-one relationship. Now we have to do the next part. So next, we have to put on here the information about the actual medications the patient's taking. So I'm going to click and drag an entity. We're going to have two entities here for patient's medication. We're going to have patient current medication, which is going to have two attributes, the patient key and the medication name. Now, the thing here, we also need a second table So we also need one called current medication allergies, so we know which medications the patient is allergic to. I could create another one, but instead I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V, and it'll just make a copy. It's a little bit easier just to make a copy since it's really going to be kind of the same thing. Let me get these tables out of each other's way here. So this one's going to be patient medical or medication allergies. All right, now I'm going to make one more minor change here. Rather than having the medication name as just a simple attribute, we want to make sure that the combination of the medication name and the patient key makes it unique. Because that's what's going to uniquely identify these records. Now, they're going to be relatively small tables, but the only thing that's going to be in there is the patient for which the medication is and the medication name. So instead, I'm going to drag the medication name up to the top, and I'm going to make that another primary key. So we're going to have a composite primary key. So I'll set primary. And by the way, the patient key is going to be also a foreign key. So it's going to be the primary key and the foreign key. So it's going to be both. Because the combination of the patient key and the medication name is the primary key. It's those two keys, those two fields together. But the patient key is also the foreign key to patient medical history. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing for allergies. So it's going to be the same process. I'm going to click and drag this up. I'm going to make this one a primary key, and I'm going to add foreign key to patient key. Now we can put our relationship on here. Again, I'm going to copy and paste my relationship just because it's a little bit easier. So just like before, I'm going to drag it here. I'm going to take the other end, drag it over here. I'm going to do the next one. All right, let me zoom this out a little bit so we can see these relationships. Now, it's kind of hard to see these because they're kind of one on top of the other. So we should be able to separate these a little bit by clicking and dragging. I can move this up a little bit. There we go. All right. And actually, I could probably make it a little bit nicer if I put these a little bit closer together, like so. And then by dragging this one up this way, I should be able to get it to connect on the side instead. So you have to sometimes play with these a little bit to get it to work the way you want it to. So let me click and drag this down, and I'll reconnect this side. All right, so it took a little finagling, but I finally got it. So now I have to change the relationships. So when you think about it, a patient really can have 0 or many medications and then 0 or many allergies. So some patients may have no allergies. Some could have lots of allergies, not just one. So we have to change the relationship. So the left side of this, which by the way is the end point, we know that because of the symbol, is correct. So we're going to change the begin point or the begin symbol to be 0 or more. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So it's going to be 0 or more. And that's going to be the begin symbol. So I guess it's opposite, but there we go. All right, so now my patient medical history can have 0 or more medications and 0 or more allergies. So far, so good. This is looking okay. And by the way, you can kind of clean these up a little bit sometimes by moving stuff around a little bit, and it should keep dragging the stuff with it, although sometimes it doesn't, as you saw with mine. This one got sort of lost. All right, so you can make it look a little prettier. Now, here's one problem that you may notice, and we're going to talk about this more with normalization in the next unit, but one major problem I have here is that the medication name is in here twice. So we have some redundancy here that we might need to reduce. There's redundancy here in 2 senses. Number one, we're going to have the medication name listed many times. So lots of people are allergic to penicillin. So that would appear, hundreds of times in patient medication allergies. And also, some patients are taking penicillin, so they may also appear in current medication. So they're going to be in both for lots of different patients that are all taking these medications. So instead, we can make this database a little bit better by creating a table for the medications. So let's go ahead and create a new entity. I'm going to click and drag it over here. And I'm going to call this entity medications. So for the primary key, I'm going to make it medication key. And then we need the medication name. I don't need this attribute. It always gives you 3 by default, so we're going to get rid of this one that we don't need. And by the way, sometimes it's a little bit trickier to click on stuff. Sometimes you have to click around a little bit to click on things. It does get a little bit annoying. All right, so now that we've got our medications, we've got our primary key here, we no longer need our medication name on this side. Instead, we can change this to medication key. And I'll change this one as well. So we're going to change this to medication key. And since now it's not just a primary key, it's also a foreign key now. So I'm going to also make that a foreign key. Let me zoom out a little bit here. So now we have to add our relationships, just like we did before. So current medication has to have a relationship to medications, and as does allergies. So just like before, I'm going to copy and paste. So I'm going to copy and paste this relationship arrow. And I'm just going to drag it in. I'm going to copy and paste it again and do the same thing. There we go. And that works, even though one's on the bottom. It looks okay. But we do have to change these crow's foot notation because medications can appear many times in current medication, but each current medication can only have one medication reference. So we have to switch these. So we're going to set the end symbol to be 0 or more. And then we're going to make the begin symbol on here 1 and only 1. Then I have to do the same thing down here. So, and again, remember, we know the beginning and the end because of the connectors on the end. So we have this little green dot, or the little green dot with a circle around it. So we know that the little green dot with a circle around it is the end symbol, which needs to be 0 or more. And likewise, the other one, which is our begin symbol, needs to be 1 and only 1. There we go. So let me zoom this out a little bit so you can see the whole drawing. I can make it look a little nicer. I'll move this guy down. And I'll just move this up a little bit. Oops, it's really hard to see here. All right, so we're almost done. So the last step, and you're going to do this for all of your Visio drawings, whether it's for the .2 or the .1 labs, you're going to add your name to the drawing. So to do that, you're going to go to More Shapes. You're going to go to Visio Extras and show Annotations. So I'll have a whole bunch of options here. You can get kind of creative here. I'm just going to do a plain 12-point font, click and drag it. I'm going to type my name. Now it's a little small, right? It's pretty hard to see, so I'm going to click on it. So I have my box. And it's kind of hard to click on stuff sometimes. There we go. So I got the box surrounding it. I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to increase my font size. Well, 60 is a little big. I'll make it 48. There we go. All right. So there's my completed drawing for this assignment. It's got my name on it. Here's all my stuff that I drew on the diagram. I've got all my relationships the right way, so it looks pretty good. I'm just going to move this guy up a little bit, and maybe I can make this look a little nicer, but it looks okay. So at this point, you'd want to save this, as a Visio drawing, so you can always use it later on because you are going to use these again. So we reference back to these drawings later on, and you can always modify them. So I would click Save As, and I'm going to save it as, I'm going to call mine L3.1. All right, so now it's saved. You can see the name is now up here. And by the way, it's good practice to save throughout when you're working with Visio or really any Office program. You know, what if the computer crashes or something like that? But the last step that you have to do in order to turn this in, you're not going to turn in the Visio diagram. Instead, you're going to turn in an image file. So, which is nice, having an image file. So the problem with Visio diagrams, they're great, but only people who have Visio can open up Visio diagrams. In a lot of cases in industry, you're going to be sending these diagrams to people who don't have Visio. So to facilitate that, we can go to Save As. And when we click on Browse, in this drop-down, we can change it to JPEG. So I'm going to save it as a JPEG. It's going to ask me some questions here. So everything here is okay, but instead of using screen for the resolution, we're going to use source for the resolution. And also for the size, you want to use source, not the screen or the printer. So change both of these to source. The quality, 75% is okay. Sometimes I like to kick this up to 90% because it gets kind of hard to read it at a low fidelity. So I'm going to click OK. So if I look at my documents, there is my Visio version, and there's my JPEG version. And if I double click on the JPEG version, it opens up in the photo editor, and you can see it's just a basic picture. It's a JPEG image, and it has all of my elements that I drew with the correct associations. You do want to make sure that you bump up the size of these associations or these relationship lines. Otherwise, they're way too small to see when you export them. I don't know why by default in Visio it's so small. And also make sure your name is on it before you turn it in. That way your name is burned in on the drawing and we know who did it. And if you have any questions, let me know.